Some of my general background. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a vice president, I'm a lawyer, I'm a general counsel, I've been a professor. A lot of things that I've done over my life. But right now I'm enjoying art and I'm enjoying work as an attorney and enjoying life with grandchildren, which is just a joy. What led me to quilting? My sister led me to quilting. I had a sister who learned to quilt, and it's a late sister now, and she said to me, you know, Mac, which she always called me, you need to learn how to quilt. And I said, I can sew, but I couldn't quilt. I was going to Sendai, Japan as a Fulbright professor in law, and Tohoku University Law School was all male. In fact, the whole campus was all male. And they didn't know what they were going to do with me. They were excited to have this international woman coming, but they didn't know what to do. So I thought to myself, I'm not going to bother them. I had gone to my local library, and there were quilts hanging in the library. And the librarian, who I knew well, said, oh, these women have made these quilts. You ought to go see them. And I did. And they asked me to help them quilt and all of that, and I said, I'm not touching anything, but it's planted the seed. Got me a book, did one quilt, and when I went to Japan, I met a famous Japanese quilter, and that's where it really took off. You know, the difference between sewing and quilting is there's really no difference. I mean, sewing is just the joining of at least two pieces of fabric with thread. And so that's what you do in quilting. What's different is the kind of fabrics you use, the way you join them. So when I look at something like this, it's got a number of pieces of fabric that are sewn, just like my dress is sewn, and they're joined with a backing, and in the middle there's some batting. So it's just sewing. You use your sewing machine or you do it by hand. I've done both ways, and it's an art that's kind of getting lost in you know, after my generation. There's a lot of people who have just kind of decided. Everybody, when people talk to me, they say, oh, my grandmother quilted. Oh, my grandmother quilted. Wasn't like yours, Maxine, but my grandmother quilted. So it's just sewing. And not many people sew these days either. Artwork is a question of what you are trying to express through it. And there really are three broad categories of quilters. There are traditional quilters, and that's where I started. And that's where none of mine are like that anymore. But that's where you will maybe use a traditional block, like squares, and sew them together. And then the precision of your sewing and all of that is very important. And there are a number of traditional quilters, and they either like my quilting or they don't. There are also art quilters, and we fall into the more graphic kind of quilting that I do, and some of it's very abstract. I'd love to be an abstract quilter. I am not, can't do it. And then there's a third wave that's sort of coming through now called modern quilting. And they sort of take maybe a traditional block and kind of do something marvelous with it. So those are the three broad categories right now. I fall in a small area of the art quilting. Pieces that I have on display, it's always interesting to me to be able to select the pieces that go into a quilt, into a quilt show. They really reflect pretty widespread of my life in quilting. I have done like the Fibonacci one, which is really just piecing, more piecing. The quilting is getting to be important, and a little beading. And then you also have things that are more, I've got a whole series of women. And for some reason, well, I guess I know why I would like women. I have a series of women quilts, and they go from a friend who got married in Fiji that we visited to a lovely lady that I saw at a meeting, and her dress was so pretty I just had to do it. And then, you know, it started me on that trail. I also do a lot of jazz quilts. My family, my background is New Orleans and jazz, and so I never liked jazz. My husband loved it, and that's where we meet in the middle, is he listens to it and I make quilts out of it. Sometimes a quilt just jumps out of you. So this one day I was sitting at home, and I guess I was working on another quilt, and I started thinking about Diana Ross and the Supremes, and it just sort of reminded me of, being a much younger woman, and I just started it. And then, it's about girl groups, and there were so many girl groups around that time, and so I started that one. It's got metallic quilting in it, which is one of the things that I do a lot of. But it's a girl group. It's what I call it, girl groups. It's not necessarily the Supremes. It's paying homage to girl groups. Having a show at the Performing Arts Center. Let me just tell you, when we first talked about it, I thought, oh, that's nice. I'm really happy that I'll, have a place to show my art, because other than that, it sits at my house. We enjoy it, but we can't do this kind of enjoyment. And having it at the Performing Arts Center allowed my friends locally to join, because often my quilts will go to South Africa, or they'll go to Japan, or they'll go to Oklahoma, or just a number of places, and it'll be only one or two, and that's nice, but it's kind of a long way to go to see two of my quilts. But this provided us a space for me. It was kind of like old home week. And friends from Springboro, friends from Kettering, friends from Dayton, and new friends I've met along the way joined. And so this is a wonderful venue. It's pleasant. I came a little early and just kind of sat and just enjoyed it. And I had people calling me from Columbus saying, well, we didn't make it for the opening, but we'll be here, Maxine. We're going to come down and see it. So it's kind of centrally located. Those of us who are kind of in this area, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Centerville, Springboro, we can all kind of see each other's work. So it was an opportunity for others, friends and new friends, to see my work. I've had a really nice, there's a piece, you have the piece, on Desmond Tutu. It was an invited show. Someone reached out from the Michigan State University to say that they were selecting quilters from the United States and quilters from South Africa to celebrate Desmond Tutu's life. And so that show toured throughout South Africa, and the quilt went. I didn't get to go. My first international quilt was one that I did while I was a Fulbright professor at Tohoku University in Sendai, and it was a piece. It was a large piece that really just showed a Japanese story. I had begun reading Japanese stories, and I said, let me do a quilt on a Japanese story. And my friend who taught quilting in Japan said, oh, Maxine, let's paint with fabric, and that's where I did it. So there was one in Japan. Both of those are published in volumes, so that's another nice side of that, is you can see your work in books and publications. To see my work, you're probably going to have to go and see my website. But now, I show pretty often in this area, so I have 3 pieces that are over in Afro-American Museum in Wilberforce. I have 2 pieces that will be shown in the Dayton Art Institute until the end of May. So, it's a little more sporadic than when you get a real good show like this. But I continue to create and to exhibit in the greater Dayton, Springboro, Kettering area. The response has just been overwhelming. One of the things about doing your own work is you're your worst critic. So when you look at your work, or when I look at my work, it's just like, this is okay. And it's been interesting. We've been on Zoom calls for so long. So I have 3 pieces in my studio that my staff has seen for 2 years. I never put anything else up because I'm not sure it's good enough. And it's just so nice. I mean, the work in the Dayton Daily News, the work that you all printed, my boss, my colleagues sent out notes telling everybody about the show and giving them links to the stories that were written. It's a wonderful, wonderful high. The easiest way to get a hold of me is to go to my website, which is MaxineThomasArts.com, and they can leave an email and I will follow up with them. I work locally. I'm at the Kettering Foundation. If you can't find me on the website, you can always find me at the Kettering Foundation, or somebody else can find me because I've been there a long time. I guess the best advice I know of is to go or try to join a quilt group or go visit a quilt group. I wouldn't join it right away. I'd go visit a quilt group. The way I learned was to visit a quilt group, and I saw what they were doing, and I was, concerned that I couldn't ever do it myself, but I liked it. And then you can get a book. The libraries are wonderful. I still use library books to help to learn, but I would start with, the Miami Valley Art Quilters Network or the Miami Valley Quilters Network. There's several in this area that you can join, so just look. I wanted to say thanks. I mean, this was a chance meeting. I put 2 quilts in a show in Springboro with a friend, and now I've expanded my circle of friends. I genuinely appreciate it. It's been a blast. It's been fun, and I just want to say thank you to the people of Springboro, to my colleagues who work with me, who showed up that night, and it's been great. You guys have a wonderful place here, and I wish you all the best.